The frontier did not produce one type of killer. It produced 10. And the difference between them is the difference between a man who shot from rage and a man who shot for money, between a man who killed to survive and a man who killed because no one had yet found a way to stop him. The legend collapses them into a single image. The dusty street, the drawn iron, the man left standing. The record separates them into something considerably more unsettling. These are the 10 deadliest gunslingers the American West ever produced. Not ranked by reputation, ranked by what the documented record actually shows. Welcome to American Old West Tales, where the frontier gets the honest accounting it has always deserved and never received. Number 10. Dallas Stoudenmeier, 4 dead in 5 seconds. April 14th, 1881. El Paso, Texas. 3 days after Dallas Stoudenmeier accepted the marshal's badge in a town that had burned through 4 marshals in the previous year, a street argument ignited into gunfire. Stoudenmeier drew 2.44 caliber Colt revolvers, 1 in each hand, and in 5 seconds had shot 3 men dead. A 4th man, caught in the crossfire, died in the street beside them. 4 dead, 5 seconds. The stopwatch was not metaphorical. He killed 10 men in documented gunfights before the Manning brothers caught him in September 1882 and shot him from behind. He was 36 years old. El Paso, which had no law before he arrived, had no one left to kill after he did. Number 9. King Fisher. The man who posted a sign. John King Fisher never hid what he was. At the entrance to his South Texas ranch, he posted a wooden sign on the main road that read, "This is King Fisher's road. Take the other one." Most people did. He killed his first men in Mexico, rustling operations that turned violent, and by his mid-20s had documented kills across 2 countries. In his most specific demonstration of his particular character, he shot 4 Mexican cowboys in a single confrontation, hit one with a branding iron, outdrew a second, then shot the other 2 while they were unarmed. He always dressed for it. Brightly colored clothes, twin ivory-handled pistols. A man who wanted to be seen before he was heard. In March 1884, he was ambushed and killed alongside gunslinger Ben Thompson in a San Antonio theater, shot 9 times before he hit the floor. He was 30 years old. Number 8. Doc Holliday, the dying man nobody could kill. John Henry Holliday was a dentist. He was also dying from tuberculosis from the age of 22 onward, which gave him a specific relationship with violence that healthy men rarely develop. When a man is already certain of his death, the calculation that restrains most people in dangerous situations simply does not apply. Doc Holliday had nothing to lose on the day he met Wyatt Earp, and nothing to lose on every subsequent day that followed. He stood with the Earps at the OK Corral on October 26, 1881, 30 seconds. 3 men dead, Doc's coat carrying a bullet hole through the hip. He rode with Wyatt on the vendetta ride that followed Morgan's murder, adding bodies to a trail that crossed 3 counties. He survived every gunfight the frontier offered him, and died in a Glenwood Springs, Colorado hotel bed on November 8, 1887. Tuberculosis finally finishing what no bullet had managed. He reportedly looked at his bare feet on the morning of his death and said, "This is funny." He had expected to die with his boots on. The disease denied him even that. Number 7. Billy the Kid. He was born Henry McCarty in New York City in 1859. He was 21 years old when Pat Garrett shot him once in the chest in a darkened room at Fort Sumner on July 14, 1881. Between those 2 dates, 12 years of frontier life, he killed 8 documented men and survived situations that should have ended him a dozen times before Garrett found him. The most specific demonstration of what he was: the burning of McSween's house in Lincoln on July 19, 1878. 40 men outside. The building in flames, every exit covered. Billy ran out of the back door in the dark with a revolver in each hand, firing in both directions, and made it across the yard while every gun outside him was firing. He was the last man out of that building. Everyone else who ran was killed. He did not survive because he was lucky. He survived because he was faster and cooler under fire than anyone else in that yard. Garrett was the one man who understood that the only way to stop that was to remove the element of chance entirely. Number 6. Wild Bill Hickok. The only true duel. James Butler Hickok carried two 1851 Colt Navy revolvers in a red sash at his waist, butts forward, drawn cavalry style across his body. A method faster than the conventional hip draw that most men used. He had refined the technique through years of service as a Union scout, spy, and sharpshooter during the Civil War, before the frontier got him. On July 21st, 1865, in the public square of Springfield, Missouri, he faced Davis Tutt at 75 yards into what historians have documented as the only genuine stand-up quick-draw duel in the history of the American West, the format that every dime novel described and that almost never actually occurred. Tutt drew first. Hickok drew and fired once. Tutt took the bullet through the heart and was dead before he finished falling. Hickok was Marshal of Abilene in 1871 when he accidentally shot his own deputy dead during a gunfight, a killing that haunted him for the remaining 5 years of his life. On August 2nd, 1876, in Deadwood, Dakota Territory, a drifter named Jack McCall walked up behind him while he played poker and shot him in the back of the head. He was holding two pair, aces and eights, the dead man's hand, named for him, still called that today. Number 5. Jesse James, the cause that never ended. Jesse James robbed his first bank in 1866. He robbed his last train in 1881. In the 15 years between, he became the most famous outlaw in American history, not because he was the most prolific killer, but because he had a newspaper editor named John Newman Edwards who published his letters and framed every robbery as Confederate resistance against Yankee banks and railroads. The mythology served him as effectively as the gun. He operated in open country because half of Missouri thought he was a folk hero. He survived 16 years of Pinkerton pursuit, including the January 1875 bombing of his family's farmhouse that killed his 8-year-old half-brother and blew off his mother's arm because the communities around him protected him. On April 3rd, 1882, Robert Ford shot him in the back of the head in his own home. Ford collected $5,000. His mother had one word engraved on Jesse's tombstone: murdered. Number 4. Butch Cassidy, the system. Robert Leroy Parker was dangerous in a way that required no gun. He built a structure, the Wild Bunch, operating from safe ranches across Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah, with relay horses cached along escape routes before the robbery was ever attempted. The Union Pacific robbery of June 2nd, 1899, produced between $30,000 and $60,000 from a single express car. The Pinkerton Agency spent 5 years and considerable resources before Cassidy and the Sundance Kid simply left for South America in 1901, whether he died in Bolivia in 1908 or returned to the United States and lived under an assumed name. His sister maintained the latter until her own death. The Pinkertons never formally closed the file. They closed it practically. They could not catch him on the continent. They had no authority on the next one. Number 3. Clay Allison, the Wolf of the Washita. The Confederate Army's discharge papers for Clay Allison described him as suffering from a condition that produced episodes of a mixed character, partly epileptic, partly maniacal. They discharged him as unfit for organized military service. He immediately re-enlisted in a unit that did not read paperwork carefully. After the war, he went to New Mexico, built a cattle operation, and killed men with the specific unpredictability of someone for whom the line between irritation and homicide had been placed considerably lower than in most human beings. He beheaded a man he suspected of murder and carried the head into a bar to have a drink with it. He killed Chunk Colbert at a dinner table, sat across from a man who had come specifically to kill him, shared a meal, and shot him in the head when Colbert reached for his gun. When asked why he had eaten with a man who wanted to kill him, Allison said he would not want to send a man to hell on an empty stomach. On July 3rd, 1887, a wagon wheel ran over his neck when he fell from the driver's seat of a supply wagon near Pecos, Texas. He died of the injury. The frontier produced no ending adequate to the man, so it gave him a farm accident instead. Number 2, Tom Horn, $600. Tom Horn was not a gunfighter. He was an instrument. He had served as an Army scout. He had ridden with Al Sieber in the Apache campaigns. He had been present at Geronimo's surrender in 1886. By the 1890s, Wyoming's cattle barons were paying him $600 per contract to remove men from the range who were inconvenient to them. He required a rock placed under the head of each victim as his signature, his receipt, left so his employers would know the invoice could be settled. On July 18, 1901, 14-year-old Willie Nickel was shot twice in the back near his family's Iron Mountain, Wyoming homestead, likely mistaken for his father. In January 1902, Deputy Marshal Joe LaForce sat Horn down while still drunk and asked him about it. Hidden stenographers recorded Horn telling LaForce it was the best shot he ever made and the dirtiest trick he ever done. He was hanged in Cheyenne on November 20th, 1903. He was working until the day they hanged him, and he asked no one's forgiveness for any of it. Number 1, John Wesley Hardin, the preacher's son. He was named after the founder of the Methodist faith. His father was a circuit preacher. He killed his first man at 15. 27 documented kills. He claimed 42. The gap between what he admitted and what could be verified is itself a statement about a man for whom keeping accurate count felt like an unnecessary courtesy to the dead. He carried 2 pistols in chest holsters, cross-draw, faster than anything worn on the hip, and used them in hotel rooms, saloons, cattle trails, and open streets with the same unhurried efficiency. Wild Bill Hickok, after meeting him in Abilene in 1871, a meeting that ended with Hardin pointing his pistols at Hickok and walking backward out of the room, told people afterward that Hardin was the gamest and quickest boy he had ever seen. Coming from Hickok, that was not admiration. It was a warning. Hardin served 17 years. He studied law. He passed the bar. He set up a practice in El Paso. On August 19, 1895, while shaking dice at the Acme Saloon, John Selman walked up behind him and shot him through the back of the head. The man who had spent 30 years refusing to turn his back had turned his back. He was 42 years old. The preacher's son, the most documented killer in the history of the American West. He never heard it coming.